Hi, this is Libby.
And this is Roberta.
And this is ArtBlog Radio. Today we're talking to Tim McFarlane. His juicy abstract paintings have been on our radar for years. He's included in this year's Northeast edition of New American Paintings. That's issue number 92. And he's going to be in a show at Bridget Mayer Gallery in November. Initially, 10 years ago when we first saw his work, Tim's works had a hard-edged, rectangular, simple color backgrounds, and they were kind of like a cityscape reduced to stripes of color. But over time, Tim's works have morphed into something quite different. They left behind the geometry for nets and squiggles, and more recently for biology with bright, colorful shapes that look like amoebas or maybe clouds. But Tim's works have always been about people and relationships and how people affect each other, and he's always been a terrific colorist. So, Tim, in addition to painting, you're a photographer, and you were an early Flickr user, and a lot of it was in black and white. And I'm wondering, such a colorist, and yet you have chosen to take so many photographs in black and white. Can you tell us a little about that?
There's something about black and white photography that just I've always thought was very mysterious, and also sometimes went beyond color. You know, when you remove color, it makes you focus on things in a different way within the image. There are the gradations of shades within black and white that you don't necessarily see with color.
So let's talk about your schooling for art. You went to art school. You went to Temple, Tyler,
Yes.
And you graduated in 1994.
Yes.
Did you intend at that time to make it as an artist? Did you have the intention of, I want to come out and be an artist, and then what happened? What set you on a career path?
I actually, it was way before that I determined that I wanted to be an artist. It was in high school. It wasn't so much like wanting to make it as an artist. I think at that time, at that young age, it was more about feeling like this is something that I could do. This is where I felt like I could excel at, where other kids were, great at sports, I was good at English and horrible at math, but when I got into the art class, that's where I felt like I kind of fit.
Any mentors that you had in high school that were instrumental?
Yeah, my high school art teacher, his name was Richard Siegel at Olney High School. He taught a lot of color, and he introduced me to the Impressionists, and that's where I started getting my love of color, through looking at Monet's, even people, post-impressionists like Cézanne, and even going back to old masterworks as well.
So after college then, did you have a job to step into, and did you get this studio? You have this lovely, huge studio that we're sitting in, which you've had for 10 years now.
Well, when I came out of school, I was making art for a while in a house in West Philly. I lived in West Philly for about 4 years. After that, I found a space at 12th and Vine, at a building that's still there, but it's abandoned, unfortunately. And I've always worked. I've worked through high school. I worked through college, and so I always had a job. I worked as a manager at a Scene Market and Cafe, natural food store, independently owned natural food store.
You still work for them?
I still work there, yes.
So you are represented by a gallery in Philadelphia. Can you tell us a story about how that happened? Because there's not a lot of artists in this city, or probably any city, that are actually represented by a gallery.
Yeah. Well, around 2002, around 2001, actually, I saw that Bridget Mayer was opening up. And at the time, there were only, I think, 3 galleries in the city that I could feel like my work could fit into, and hers was one of them.
What were the other 2?
The other 2 were Larry Becker and Penn and Mincy Gallery. So it was those 3 galleries that I was kind of, and at that time I was just at a place where I felt confident enough to be able to approach a gallery. It was kind of interesting because at the same time, around 2002, there were some things happening for me as well. I was publishing New American Paintings for the first time. And also I was in the Fleischer Challenge Show in 2001, September 2001. Unfortunately, September 11th happened, and nobody saw the show, but that's okay. It was that was an unfortunate coincidence. In early 2001, late 2001, she actually contacted me and asked me to, at that time, give her slides. So then a number of months went by. It was a long introduction, I guess, So we had a studio visit, we talked, and a few weeks later, I signed on with her. I mean, it was a big thing for me, as it would be for any artist. And I still was kind of skeptical and kind of not sure, but I was kind of ready for that step, I think. So.
Why were you skeptical?
I'd done my homework about galleries and so forth, and different types of galleries, and you hear horror stories about how some gallerists, they don't pay on time, they don't really care about the artist's work, they don't do any promotion. But, I took that leap of faith, and, we've built a relationship over the years, and that's what it is. It's a relationship. It goes up, it goes down. But overall, I've been pretty fortunate with Bridget. She's a very, very good, hardworking gallerist, and I've been pretty fortunate with her.
So let's talk about your paintings a little bit.
Okay.
They've changed quite a bit over time, and I'm wondering if you could talk about that evolution.
The works that you're familiar with from the beginning, the more architectural work, was a real break from what I was doing before, which was actually more mixed media and also very organic looking mark making. I came to a point where I felt like, okay, I really can't do any more with this. So I started getting the itch to do work that was much more expressive in how I handle paint. And I slowly started coming back towards a more organic sort of mark making, where out of the grids came these open webs of grids, where it was like they're still kind of hard edged, but they were much more expansive. Instead of having these rigid lines and having, color blocks, so to speak, I leave a lot of areas open, from almost like process painting to a certain degree, where, I leave a lot of the beginning. You can see back through the history of the painting to a certain degree in a lot of my work. Those open grids just became a little looser. I've gotten to a point of having made so much work that now I'm reaching back to bring old ideas forward into new work, which is something I do constantly, finding new ways of using old ideas. So there's this sort of back and forth, there's this dialogue going on.
Do you think there's an emotional content to your paintings? Because I look at them and I see in some of them they're very joyful. The colors in particular make you think happy thoughts. They're very, very happy colors that you choose, but not in all of your paintings. Mm-hmm. So is there an emotional sort of connection between you and what you're doing?
It could be, but it's more of a formal thing. It's more about finding interesting ways of using color. And sometimes, it might look dark, so to speak. I'm using quotes. It might look dark, but it doesn't necessarily connote, that I'm in this, dreary period, or, and this is what's coming out. It's really just about finding different ways of using color and using form, and trying to keep the work fresh and interesting.
So what are you reading these days? You have lots of magazines and books around. Who are you reading?
Oh, wow. Well, I read, as far as magazines, periodically I read this one called Elephant. I read modern painters.
Do you read things that are not art?
I do, yeah. I do. I read science fiction. I read some nonfiction from time to time.
About what?
Biographies, mostly like artist biographies lately.
How about music?
Music, I'm all over the place. But I do like a lot of experimental. I like a lot of electronic music. I like a lot of dance music. I like a lot of house. But I like a lot of glitchy, minimal techno as well. I don't know, just experimental and just out of the mainstream, I guess. Anything that I love Bjork. I don't love everything that she does, but I love the risks that she takes. I really admire her as a recording artist.
Tell us about what risk means in your own work.
It's just being willing to let go, being able to let go of preconceived notions of who I think I am as an artist. Because you can do a certain type of work for a while, and you feel identified with this work. But there are times when I start feeling this I get to this point where I start feeling this anxiety inside where I'm like, I've done enough of this. I need to try and do something else. I need to move it somewhere else. And then it becomes really, really scary. For instance, this little piece right here, I'm pointing to like a small 6x6 panel that I did that's like the precursor to all the interruption work. I sat on that for months before I did anything else with it. I did this little piece where I had a couple of colors. I laid down wallpaper samples, and I had a couple colors, this yellow and this blue, so I just made these squiggly lines, and I didn't really like what I did, and I started painting it out with this this bluish gray color. There was something about that really grabbed me, but I didn't know what to do with it at the time. I didn't see how it fit into what I was doing before. So it took me a number of months before I could actually, get myself to start integrating this. And once I did that, once I got past that initial anxiety about it, it took off.
That's really great to recognize something that others would have said, oh my God, that's a mistake, I'm throwing that away. Mm-hmm. But to sit with it and say, well, maybe not. What is it about that? Right. And then to grow it into something else. That
happens a lot. I mean, with me anyway. So.
Do you have a drawing practice? Sketchbooks?
I do keep sketchbooks, but I write in them more than I actually draw. Because the work that I do, I go right into the work. There's no preconceived idea. I mean, I might have an idea in my head, but there's no need for me to like sit down and sketch and then go to the work. I just go pretty much straight to the work.
So let's talk about your color. You are an African American, and you're a very successful painter in Philadelphia, and very few people who can say that. So do you feel like you have anything that you could be a role model for younger artists coming up to steer them to a path of being a successful artist?
I think
in a community that's primarily white.
Right, absolutely. I definitely think that's definitely a possibility. It was interesting for me when I was coming up because there was nobody really. I mean, there were a few people who not that I knew, but I knew of, who were African American artists. I remember one guy in particular who was a substitute teacher. This was during high school, and he came in, and he was African American, and my regular art teacher was out, and he came in. I remember he had on like a yellow shirt, button down shirt. He had this afro. This is like the 80s. So afros are still around, and he brought in his drawings, and he had these drawings of these voluptuous black women, and it was like, whoa, because I hadn't seen anything like that, like this was in school, and they were nudes. He was like, he just came in, he put them up, and he talked about himself, talked about the work, and I don't know, we did something that day. I don't remember what we did, but the thing that stuck out about him for me was the fact that he was African American, and he just had this this confidence about him and his work and what he was doing that really kind of stuck with me. It still resonates for me. Like, it was the smallest thing, and it wasn't, that made me feel like, wow, I'm going to go ahead and do this.
So we've been talking to Tim McFarlane, and thanks for talking to us.
Thanks, Tim. It was great.
Cool.
Thanks. ArtBlog Radio is brought to you by the ArtBlog.org. Thanks to our sponsors, including the Knight Foundation.
Also, we want to thank Peter Crimmins, who makes